The depot at Willow Creek smelled of dust, coal smoke, and horse sweat. The train had just grown to a halt, iron wheels screeching against steel rails, sending a shiver through the ground beneath Clara Mayfield's feet. She held her breath as the doors clanged open and passengers spilled onto the platform. Her hands clutched at her skirt, smoothing the faded fabric again and again, though it could do nothing to hide how threadbare it was from years of careful wear. The trunk at her side, her only possession of real weight, seemed larger than she was. It carried her few dresses, a quilt stitched by her mother before passing, and a single photograph of the house she had left behind in Missouri. All she had left of her old life rested in that trunk, and all she hoped to begin waited for her here. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she searched the crowd for a familiar face. Not familiar by sight, perhaps, but by faith. She had exchanged letters for months with Henry Carver, a rancher who had advertised for a wife. His words had been plain but steady, promising her a place in his home, a chance at family, a partnership on the wild land where his cattle roamed. Clara had held onto those words like rope over storm water. She had dared to believe she was wanted, needed even, after years of being overlooked. And now, she expected to find him here, hat in hand, a half-shy smile waiting. But the moment her eyes found him, the air froze. Henry stood apart from the bustling depot crowd, his arms crossed, his face set in a hard scowl. He was taller than she had imagined, his shoulders broad, but his eyes swept over her with a sharpness that cut her more deeply than any knife. Clara offered him a nervous smile, stepping forward just enough for her boots to scrape the platform. "Mr. Carver," her voice trembled like a bird's wing. His expression soured. "You're Clara Mayfield." His tone carried disbelief, like he'd been cheated. "Yes, sir." She smoothed her skirt again. I came as we agreed. The train was on time. I thought you might." He cut her off with a shake of his head, his voice dropping low but sharp enough that nearby ears turned toward them. "This won't do. This ain't what I signed for." Confusion swept her, leaving her cold. "I don't understand." Henry glanced her up and down, his jaw tightening. "I wrote for a strong woman. Someone built to handle the ranch, pull her share, keep from breaking under the work. You're too slight. Too frail looking. You'd snap like a twig in the first hard wind. You won't do." The platform hushed around them. Clara felt her cheeks flame as though the sun itself had scorched her. Her chest rose and fell with short breaths, each one harder to hold back. "But, sir, you wrote me letters. You asked me to come. I left everything." He spat into the dust near her boots. "Then you were a fool to believe paper promises. I won't have you." Her hands shook where they clutched her skirt. The whispers had started. Mothers pressed children closer. Men leaned against posts with cruel smirks. Young women tilted their bonnets toward one another to whisper. Clara's shame grew heavier with every passing second. She wanted to vanish, to be swallowed by the earth beneath her, but there was no escape. "Please," she tried again, voice cracking. "I have nowhere else to go." Henry's face hardened even further, and without another word, he turned on his heel, strode to his horse, and mounted. In another breath, the sound of hooves striking dirt echoed down the street, and he was gone. The crowd began to break apart, but not before Clara felt the sting of every set of eyes on her. She bent to touch the trunk handle, though it wrenched at her wrist. Her vision blurred with not let fall in public. She thought wildly of climbing back aboard the train and returning to St. Louis, but what waited there? Loneliness. A narrow bed in a rented room. Nights so quiet the only sound was her own breathing. She had pinned all hope to this, and now it had crumbled into dust. Her chest ached with the weight of despair. She lowered herself to the trunk, sitting on its hard edge, her hands pressed together as though in prayer. No one came near. No one offered her help. She was an abandoned promise, and no one wanted to be touched by her misfortune. Then, as the last murmurs of gossip faded into the general depot noise, a shadow fell across her. She looked up, startled. A cowboy stood before her. Broad shoulders filled his worn shirt, a trail hat shaded his eyes, and dust clung to his boots as though he had ridden far. He did not gawk like the others, did not whisper. He simply looked at her with eyes steady as the horizon. Without a word, he bent and gripped the handle of her trunk. With an ease that startled her, he hefted it to his shoulder. Murmurs rippled through the air again, heads turning. Clara blinked up at him, her breath caught. "Sir." The cowboy's jaw tightened, his voice low but carrying, every ear on the platform catching it clear. "This woman ain't left behind. She's mine now." Her lips parted. The words struck her like a hammer against glass, shattering the silence inside her chest. Whispers flared, some scandalized, some amused. But no one dared laugh outright. Something about the way the cowboy stood, unshaken, resolute, silenced mockery before it began. Clara swallowed hard. Why would you say that? He shifted the trunk more firmly on his shoulder, meeting her gaze without flinching. His eyes weren't mocking, weren't pitying. They held something else, something steady, as though he'd made a decision he would not walk back. Because no woman deserves to be tossed aside like unwanted freight. If you'll have me, miss, I'll be the man who stands beside you. Her chest rose sharply, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had no words. Her shame still burned, but through the cracks of despair, something unexpected began to stir. Hope, fragile, trembling, like the first sprout pushing through hard soil. The cowboy didn't wait for the crowd's reaction. He turned, carrying her trunk down the platform, and though her feet hesitated, Clara found herself rising to follow, her heart caught between terror and the faintest flicker of something that felt dangerously close to salvation. Clara's steps felt uncertain as she followed the cowboy away from the depot. The noise of the station still rang in her ears, those whispers, those sharp stares, the judgment etched into every stranger's face. Yet with each stride he took, she felt the distance between herself and that shame grow. His long legs carried him in calm, confident motion, and she had no choice but to trail close, her boots scuffing against the dirt as if she were tethered to him now by something invisible and unspoken. The trunk was balanced on his shoulder as though it weighed nothing. Though Clara knew how heavy it was, she had barely managed to drag it herself when boarding the train. The sight of him carrying it without complaint, without hesitation, stirred something in her chest that felt both unfamiliar and dangerous. For so long she had lived by the rule of not asking too much of anyone. Dependence had meant disappointment, and yet here he was, carrying her burden as if it were the most natural thing in the world. They stopped near the hitching post where his horse waited, a sturdy bay with a glossy coat and dark, patient eyes. He lowered her trunk with surprising gentleness, dusting his hands before turning back toward her. For the first time, he spoke. Directly to her, not to the crowd, not for the benefit of watching eyes, but just for her. "My name's Luke Callahan," he said, tipping the brim of his hat slightly. "I reckon I might have startled you back there." Clara's throat tightened, her voice fighting to break free. Why did you do that?" Her hands twisted together, fingers nervous. "You don't know me. You don't know anything about me." Luke's gaze held hers, steady and unflinching. "I didn't need to know your past to see what was happening. A woman left standing like that, well, that didn't sit right with me. You deserved someone to stand for you." The words struck her deeper than she wanted to admit. Her eyes burned, but she fought against tears. She had already given the depot crowd enough of a show, she would not break now. "But you claimed me, you said I was yours." Luke nodded once, slow. "I did, and I don't regret it. That man was a fool to toss you aside, Miss Mayfield. You came all this way, brave as anyone I've ever seen. Took grit to step off that train with nothing but your trunk and faith in his promises. That tells me more about you than you think." She faltered, her lips trembling. "But what if you're wrong about me? What if I'm not strong enough for this life?" He looked at me and saw nothing but weakness. Luke leaned a little closer, his voice gentler now. Then he wasn't looking right. "Strength don't always show in muscle and bone. Sometimes it's in the way you hold your head when the whole world is staring you down. Sometimes it's in the choice to keep standing when someone's tried to cut you low. I saw that in you today." Her breath caught. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let his words sink in and take root, but doubt clung stubbornly, whispering of failure and loss. Still, the warmth in his tone was a balm she hadn't expected. Clara shifted her gaze to the ground, to the dust swirling in the late afternoon breeze. "You don't owe me anything, Mr. Callahan. You could walk away right now, and no one would blame you." Luke's jaw flexed, his voice firm. "Maybe I don't owe you. But maybe I don't see this as a debt. Life out here ain't meant to be lived alone. Folks survive better when they've got someone beside them. I'm asking if you'll let me be that someone." She lifted her head, startled by the plainness of his words. "You mean, marriage?" His eyes softened, though his tone stayed steady. "That's what I meant when I called you wife at the depot. Not to shame you further, but to claim you so no one else could mock or dismiss you. But I don't speak light promises. If you'll have me, Clara Mayfield, I'll stand by you for real. Not just today, not just for show." Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might break her ribs. Marriage. The word carried both a sweetness and a weight that made her breath hitch. Only hours ago she had stepped off the train with hope in her heart, only to have it crushed beneath Henry Carver's disdain. Now, in the shadow of that loss, she was being offered another chance, this time not with a man who judged her body, but with one who had stepped forward when she was left discarded. But fear clawed at her. "You don't even know me," she whispered again. "What if I disappoint you, too? What if I can't be what you need?" Luke's hand brushed the horse's mane, calm and patient. "I don't expect perfection. I expect honesty. And work. If you can give those, Clara, then you won't disappoint me." The tears she had been fighting spilled at last, one slipping down her cheek before she could stop it. She quickly wiped it away, ashamed, but Luke's gaze softened further, not mocking, not pitying, only seeing. For the first time in months, she felt seen. Not as a burden, not as a disappointment, but as a person worth standing for. Her chest rose sharply, her words shaky but resolute. "If you're certain, then yes. I'll walk beside you." The faintest smile curved his mouth, small but sure. Then it settled. He tied her trunk to the back of the saddle with practiced ease before turning to her, extending a calloused hand. She hesitated only a moment before slipping her hand into his. The warmth of his grip startled her, it was solid, steady, grounding. He helped her into the saddle, swinging up behind her with a fluid motion that spoke of long years in the saddle. As the bay started down the dirt road away from Willow Creek, Clara turned her head slightly, looking back. The depot shrank in the distance, the train's smoke drifting into the sky. She thought of the whispers, the stares, the shame that had threatened to bury her. But with every hoofbeat, the sound faded, replaced by the rhythm of the trail beneath them and the steady presence of the man at her back. She leaned ever so slightly against him, not from choice at first but from exhaustion, and when she realized she had done it, she waited for him to stiffen or pull away. He didn't. He simply rode on, steady as the horizon, letting her rest there. Clara closed her eyes for a moment, the wind tugging strands of hair loose from her bonnet. She didn't know what waited at the end of this road, whether it was happiness or hardship, whether this was a beginning or just another mistake. But for the first time since she had stepped off that train, she did not feel abandoned. For the first time in a long while, she felt the fragile stirrings of something almost too precious to name. Hope.